Welcome everybody to Bitcoiner's Guide. This is the podcast we wish we would have had when we first started learning about Bitcoin. So we made it for you. We are your hosts, BigSeanHarris, Plan Marcus. Today, we are here doing it solo dolo. Nobody in the house, just us two, no guests, like the old days. Marcus, how's your trade going?
Sean, yeah, like the old days. My trade is going good, man. Trying to stack, trying to save.
Dude, speaking of the old days, in the chat that doesn't exist, uh we were reminded of some of the old days when we first started to get to know each other, and it brought us some good memories, thinking about when was that, probably early 2020 or 20, probably early 2020 when we first started to get to know each other. And I don't know, just like there's a lot of good nostalgic moments when it comes to Bitcoin, and that's only been 3 years, so it feels like an eternity. It feels like we've known each other for a long time in a good way, and so uh I don't know, there's a lot of good memories, and I feel like there's a lot more good memories to be made along the way.
Where do you think that nostalgia comes from? Because I noticed I've been like looking back a lot lately as well. Like,
Yeah,
oh, like now we're in there, like I think it was 2020 when I created this Twitter account,
yeah.
got in at 2017, but completely wasn't into Bitcoin Twitter or anything like that. I was just on
you
YouTube and
you know
but
what, sorry for keep going, my bad.
No, go ahead, go ahead. I'm just curious, like, why am I feeling nostalgic all of a sudden? Like, what
Well,
is it? Is it the point in the cycle? Is it like, oh, we're at the bottom again, and it feels like we bottomed out and we're gonna go back up? I don't know. To me, it feels like 2019, and 2019 was this period of like we went up all of a sudden. It drew me back in, right? Because I bought like on the peak at 2017, and then
yeah.
after it dumped in 2018, I kind of got like discouraged and wasn't really paying attention. But then when it started to run in 2019 again, I was like, holy shit, this thing is doing it again. It's going to happen again. And it got me so excited. And that's when I really started digging in. So, that was yeah. So, so I've sort of felt like I've come full cycle now. It's been more than a cycle, but like this
Yeah.
bottom part really feels like this was the time when I really, really got into really going down the rabbit hole in any case. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Oh yeah. What I think it is, well, someone brought in a picture from back in those days, and I think like one of the things that makes it nostalgic is just it's like a kid being born, and you're 5 years old or you're 6 years old, and you look up at the sky and you're wondering about, like, everything is new to you. Just everything in this world is new, and it's so exciting. And nowadays you look up at the stars, and sometimes you can take it for granted because you know that, oh, that's the stars up in the sky or whatever. And but back in those days it was just like, oh, there's a difficulty adjustment. Oh, every little thing about Bitcoin was so exciting because it was all so new. And we were learning all at the same time. Like, we kind of found this group of guys that like had started looking into Bitcoin in 2017. We probably started to get orange pilled in 2018 or 2019. And then like we all were looking for people, and no one in our own lives knew much about Bitcoin. And so at that point, then I was like, okay, well, let's see, well, who's on Twitter and who's talking about this. And then we all met each other. We're starting to meme, and it was just a lot of fun, to be able to think back of that in those days. It was like, it was a ton of fun. We would talk on the phone all the time, and we were just like forming these friendships that feel like they're going to last a lifetime. And I hope they do. I honestly hope they do.
yeah, yeah. Well, even if they don't, like this part of history will always be like a part that you'll look back on, like no matter how it turns out, it's
Yeah.
been really intense. It's been a lot of fun and it's a lot of ups and downs as well. And what comes to mind when you tell me that is like that picture you were talking about was Anders and Povey's show, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they were
Toxic
doing
happy hour.
their YouTube Toxic Happy Hour.
Yeah.
And back then I was like, I just came looking, so I had like what, like maybe 50 followers or 100 followers on Twitter. I just created
Yeah.
that account and I found their channel and I found Povey on Twitter and I'm just there in the YouTube chat, like just commenting and having fun and stuff. And And they were also, I literally remember, I think it was like their first or their second show they did because they put it on Twitter, like we're just gonna go live. And
Yeah.
they'd been chatting a lot like we're doing now, and they decided let's just put it online. So yeah, with them I realized, okay, they're just like plebs, just like me, but they found each other and now they decided to go on YouTube. So in my sense, it was fun to hear from them what they were going through. But one thing that comes to mind, Sean, is like back then when you first come to Twitter, you see like all these accounts and it's like it's huge, like Bitcoin
Yes.
Twitter is huge.
Yeah.
The longer I've been into it, the more you realize how small it actually is,
Yeah.
right? And that all the people that at first, when I first came in, I figured, oh, these are all like OGs and these people know exactly what they're talking about. No, they're actually just like you and me, right? But they just got in like a couple of years earlier. But I don't know, for
We're
some
all
reason,
trying to
I
figure it
think,
out. Yeah.
yeah, I think if I could go back to my early days there, I'd be like, look, just also take their word for a grain of salt, just like how everybody listening to you and I should take our word for with a grain of salt, because we're just coming in, learning as well, and you learn a lot along the way.
Yeah.
And
I think the don't trust verify is huge. And I think
yeah,
we
show
never
your
know.
heroes.
There's gonna be so many more people that come to Bitcoin who are gonna have better ideas than you or me have, or better ideas than Jack Mallers has, or better ideas than NVK. Like some of the greatest, who in my opinion, are some of like the greatest, entrepreneurs in Bitcoin right now. There's gonna be people that come along. They're gonna have even better ideas and that push Bitcoin forward in new ways that we can't even fathom yet. And so, I think that's what's important about that pleb lifestyle and the pleb feeling is like, dude, no matter how long we've been into Bitcoin, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, are you still true to Bitcoin? Are you still true to yourself? Are you loyal to it? And I think that's the most important thing. There's gonna be people that come here that know more than us, and that's why it's important to stay humble, because in Bitcoin there's always someone smarter than you, and like there's just too many things to learn about. Like you think about cryptography, you think about the history of money, Austrian economics, you think about just even game theory economics, and looking at the patterns of humanity, like human action. There's so many philosophical routes you can go down, and so you're never going to be the expert on everything in Bitcoin. And that's what's awesome about it, is there's always someone who can teach you something.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And at the same time, it's also just a bunch of people that are, no smarter than you and I.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's
we're
like,
all coming at it, and our
yeah.
mind is blown, and we can all like philosophize on where this thing can go and how big it can get. But at the same time, like we've been reality checked a couple of times as well. I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I mean, Bitcoin has done what I hoped it would do. Obviously, everybody was hoping for 100K and higher if you're looking at price, and maybe adoption as well. Maybe we were hoping on quicker adoption when I'm looking at, for instance, Bitcoin on balance sheets of corporations.
Yeah.
I thought that would have taken a massive acceleration after Saylor came in.
Me too.
That maybe hasn't gone as fast as we did. On the other hand, we've got like a nation state actually adopted
Fine.
Bitcoin, right? So that came a lot faster. Maybe it's not the biggest country, and that's why, but have you heard the news today? Because we're just kind of like chatting, right?
Yeah.
It's just like actually we were supposed to have a guest today on, but I overslept yesterday for another show, and then today we were supposed to have somebody else, and he didn't show up today, so we're gonna have to make up for that. But one of the news I wanted to ask you about, I heard that Bhutan, the nation state of Bhutan in Southeast Asia, has been stacking sats. Apparently, it came out.
Bhutan. I'm sorry, I've never even heard of this country before. How do you spell Bhutan? I'm looking this up right now.
Bhutan is Bhutan, and
B
I
H U
haven't
A T N. What is it? Bhutan.
Bhutan Bhutan. I believe it's on one of the. It's
In the
like
Himalayas.
Indonesia
Edge.
has a bunch of islands. Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe Bhutan has.
So they've been stacking.
Yeah, apparently their sovereign wealth fund had a bunch of investments, but Singapore Huddle pointed this out. He said they weren't actually holding any Bitcoin because they were using what was it, the BlockFi and
Oh, really?
those kind of services. But still,
Uh,
it's a sign, that like, we are
sometimes,
seeing like
sometimes, you
sovereign
know,
wealth.
sometimes you got to go through the little shitcoin phase. You got to you got to lose some Bitcoin to, and then you really start to think, hey, what is it? Is this all just a scam or is this real? It can take a couple years to really learn.
Yeah. Besides the shitcoining, it's also, of course, like as a nation state or as a massive sovereign wealth fund or pension fund, how do you hold your own keys, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, they're
That's
probably going to go to an exchange or some third party service to custody it for them. Yeah, and then not
it.
your keys, not your coins. You have that third party risk again.
So it looks like the population there is a little just under 800,000 people, if I'm looking right.
Right.
So
And
not that, not that
geographically,
big.
it's located like south of the Philippines, right next to Indonesia, I believe. Is that correct, or am I mistaken?
It looks well. The Philippines are islands. I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's in.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an island. An island. It's all landlocked from what I'm
Is
seeing.
it?
Yeah,
Let me
like
see where
it's on the
Bhutan
Eastern
is.
Inland. Either way, that is interesting. That's kind of what we've always been saying, right? Is that there's going to be smaller countries
Oh, yeah.
that are going to be piling the Bitcoin first because they're going to realize, hey, this is our chance. And it's the same. It's like again, this just goes back to that pleb mentality of, you know, a lot of us who feel like we didn't have a chance. Like think about being like most of a lot of people in Bitcoin are millennials. And granted, there are a lot of Gen X, there's some boomers too, there's Gen Z as well. But specifically the millennials, it's like you get to a point where you realize, dude, the cards are kind of stacked against us in the traditional fiat system. And so you get to a point where you're like, well, we don't have much to lose because we're going to lose anyway if we stay in the system. So once you really go down the rabbit hole of what's money, and so then Bitcoin is that alternative of, hey, this is something that is working. It's been working for 14 years and it seems like it's going to continue to work and it seems better than the fiat system. And if you get in early, then you have the first mover's advantage. And so I think that's what these smaller countries are realizing too. It's like, hey, look, the IMF has been these economical hitmen, and they've been taking advantage of these smaller countries. And so maybe Bitcoin can be somewhat of a salvador, like a savior to them. And that's what's interesting about the first country that ever did buy Bitcoin. Their name is translates to the savior, which is which is a little crazy. A little side tip right there. So what are you still looking that up right now? Where they're located?
No, I looked it up. I confuse it with Brunei. Brunei is a country there that's there in Southeast Asia. Bhutan, I looked up. It's you're right. It's completely landlocked. It's close to Nepal, so it's borders the north of India, between China and Myanmar. So
Yeah.
yeah, not a very well known country.
Yeah. So I
At
mean
least not by me, obviously. I
a
don't want to speak for other people. Yeah.
yeah. I'd never even heard of the country until you just mentioned it. So
No, but
maybe
I don't
it's
know. I
still
just think it's interesting, Sean. It's like these countries, like a couple of years ago, it was like now it's actually all happening, it's and you see it like in small little ways, it's so things keep happening and yeah, with time it's going to happen more and more and more. If you're talking about that nostalgia phase, compared to a couple of years ago, sometimes I still like surprise myself. You hear like these news items coming out and everybody's like not even like retweeting it anymore. They just like, what a shit coin or whatever, they're not even buying real Bitcoin. Well, a couple of years ago, it would have been
that way. Yes.
massive news,
Yeah.
and
But yeah.
so we get kind of used to like this new phase, and if I still look at like all the check marks, because I guess something you got to keep asking yourself, right? As Bitcoin gets more and more adopted, and you kind of see like diminishing returns over time. But is it really diminishing returns, or are we just like in that slowly and the suddenly phase still has to come, right? I mean, what happens if nation states really start stacking up against each other, and what would that do for like the flow of demand on a constant basis? And I don't know, but if I keep looking at how everything's going, I mean, hash rate is still going up and up and up. The amount of users coming in with every cycle, this last bull run pulled in a lot of new people. Plus,
Yeah.
the price is now coming out of a bottom and pulling back up. Everybody's going to be in like that same phase. I at least imagine at least a good number of people will have the same emotion that I had. Like, oh, you buy it at the top, then it falls 80 or 75%, and you're like completely like, oh, I was a
Heaven.
sucker.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden this thing jumps back up from 16K to where are we now? Like 30K, 29K.
Yeah.
And you look at the pattern, and it's like, oh yeah, this is like the fourth time it's doing this now. So if I project that out, and the halving's coming up in a year, I might want to stack my ass off right now, because this could be like a life-saving opportunity. And then we start all over again where we were before. But I do imagine, however, that other people might look at it and they're seeing this graph, and maybe it's not like the 40x or 20x cycles anymore, but maybe it's a 5x. So what's going to happen next time? Is it going to be a 2x or a 3x? So, and that's probably why people are going to be like, wow, hexes might be better because this guy Richard Hart is telling me
Yeah.
Bitcoin is just a slow 2x, and I'm gonna promise you 100x. So who
It,
knows? I think that whole shitcoinery is gonna be another big thing this coming cycle.
it really does bring up a question, right? Because Bitcoin has more attributes to it than just the NGU, the number go up, right? And there's a reason why the number goes up. And I think it's when people, I think there's two main reasons. Obviously, is when people understand what it is, and then the halving, I think the halving plays a big role in why it goes up. And I guess some people might say, it's going to be diminishing returns because the fees become a bigger chunk of the block subsidy, because it's the block reward plus the fees. And so as Bitcoin gets cut in half, and that block reward gets cut in half, then the fees actually become a bigger percentage of the total block reward. So as that happens, maybe that does bring, it gets cut in half, but it doesn't really get cut in half because there's still, you got to account for those fees. So I mean, I think that could be an argument. The more that I look at it, though, I just think that I just don't think it really matters. I think more and more people are going to understand what Bitcoin is, and I think that is like the bigger issue. Is you look at these countries, right? And I think this is a point that Preston Pish brings up a lot, right? Like, look at the countries that are net consumers versus net producers. All these countries that are net producers that actually provide things of value to the world, like, whether it's energy or it's food or whatever it may be, or manufacturing supplies. uh why would they continue? I just don't understand, why would they continue to accept payment for something that these net consumers can print? Like, it doesn't make any sense, like, why? If I am working my butt off, I would imagine that the people who are giving me my money
Yeah, but
would
it
have to
makes it
also work
makes
would also have to work their butt off to get that money, that something would have to happen for them to get that money, that they couldn't just print
but
it.
let's be honest, right? I think a lot of like plebs and population of countries, they don't think about this stuff. But
Yeah.
nation states know damn well that the United States has the world reserve currency, and
Mhm.
that they're the ones being able to literally print anything they want, right? Like they
Yeah.
can just print dollars. Every other country has to try and get dollars. The United States is sitting on a dollar printing machine. So when they want to buy oil, they can just print a bunch of sheets of dollars, right? And send it over to Saudi Arabia, and they get oil in return.
Or press a
Everybody
button now, right? You
knew
press a button and
every
digitally.
right, right. So everybody knew that this was, like a scam.
Yeah.
But why did everybody agree to do it? Because the United States enforced it, right?
Yeah.
Like they made a deal through the IMF and the whole Bretton Woods, blah 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 blah, and their petrodollar system. Anybody who said, you know what, forget you, United States, I'm going to make my own gold currency. We all know what happened to them. I mean, look, like right now, there's like nuclear subs in the submarines laying right in front of Saudi Arabia because MBS said we're not in the mood to please the US anymore. So the first thing the US does is like send a nuclear submarine to their doorstep, to help the negotiations, right?
Mafia,
So,
mafia
but
tactics
what
right
what
here.
we're seeing now is that for some reason there's so much infighting. At least that's my view. There's been so much like infighting in US politics, and also lack of credibility after the Gulf Wars and stuff, where people kind of like now all seem to agree that that was like a war where we should have never gone into Iraq. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and it was just about oil and et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm.
I, yeah, and then we had like two, a Republican president and a Democrat president that don't seem to be, very much respected on the international stage. China is up and coming, and got this whole war in Ukraine. So yeah, it's a fascinating story that's unfolding. I think you're completely right, right? You can People coming in can look at it either two ways. I think a lot of people get drawn in from the number of Bitcoin going up or shitcoin numbers going up, and like, I need money, right? Everybody's like struggling, and we can go into why that is from a fiat standard standpoint of view. So it draws people in, but this other story that's unfolding of like how bad the dollar currently is and how much inflation we've had, and after corona how much money was printed and checks being sent out, and then Russia being kicked off of Swift, and now we've got all these other nation states deciding, you know what, maybe we should stop using the dollar. And
Mm.
it seems like the US is having trouble reining this in or keeping this under control, right? Because once you leave one sheep jump over the fence, if you don't like put him back in his cage quick, then you might have the risk that a bunch of sheep start figuring this out and start jumping over the fence as well. And before you know it, like the whole herd starts jumping out of your fenced area. And I don't
Well,
know, that to me, that's what I'm seeing right now.
well,
And I don't know
Weinekiss,
where that's going,
you
but
see that tweet? I mean, I know you saw that tweet because I saw you tweeted at it. Weinekiss was talking about how in Latin America they love Bukele, right? It's almost like
yeah,
everyone wishes that
absolutely.
Bukele was their president in Latin America.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
so,
when I was in Belize last year, I had the same experience. Like we were literally just out in the I won't want to say the bush, but we were driving around the country, and we just stopped along the road. And I'm somebody who always talking Bitcoin, so there was this guy at the bar. We ended up talking to him, and he was from El Salvador, living in Belize, working there. So I asked him. I even made a little video and I posted it back then.
I remember that.
But
Yeah.
this guy was like, yeah, like everybody out here is watching, and the bartender behind the bar too. And yeah, even here in Colombia, where I'm at now, people are all watching what's going on in El Salvador, and they're, like the newspaper is always full of what's happening there. Not only that they reduce the crime rate, but the way they're standing up to the US. And I get the sense that a lot of these countries want to do the same thing, but they're kind of just seeing how this plays out first, right? I mean, you've got this silent, I don't know, it feels that way, like the silent majority, not always. A lot of people will agree with the crazy one standing up to fight the system, but they're afraid of the system, so they stay quiet, but they are kind of like quietly rooting for him, and that's
Yeah.
that's the sense what I'm feeling.
Did, on another subject, dude, did you see Luke? So I saw this tweet. Obviously, I'm always just looking on Twitter. This tweet from Luke Broyles, which made me think a lot because he was like, yeah, I got some sushi for like $25, right? And he was like, it was 84,000 sats. He was like, one day that 84,000 sats is gonna be like life savings for a family, which is kind of crazy to think about. I mean, especially as people continue to buy more Bitcoin, and it's nation states and companies. Like Sailor has, like MicroStrategy has over 100,000, like 140,000 Bitcoin, right? So, and they're like a small publicly traded company. Imagine when these bigger companies get into it, and all of these huge institutions, there's like a bunch of them that own like 50,000 coins. Well, then the marginal coins that people can actually get, like that aren't being just hodled, it's going to be crazy small. So the amount of Bitcoin that you'll actually need, the sets that you'll actually need, won't really be that much. Like you can buy like if you buy like $100 of sats right now and just sat on that for the next 30 years, depending on how adoption goes, like that might be good, right? We'll see. I'm just kind of putting that out there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Then
it's just funny because he was saying like I think someone else mentioned, back in the day, I remember when I used to be able to get a burger and a Coke for 15 cents, and then now,
what? You
I don't
bought a
know, it was
burger and a Coke for 15 cents? I don't
I
believe that. Come on.
don't know.
Come on. You're not that old, dude.
He was an extra boom. It was a boomer. It was the boomer's boomer. I don't
Oh, I thought you said you bought it.
No,
Okay.
not me, not me. Someone else tweeted that. Someone else tweeted it. I don't know. I mean, it was something like that, or 50 cents, right? Or a dollar. He said something like a
I
certain
don't
amount.
know. Like I'm 42, and I remember when I was in high school, I used to go to Burger King and I would buy like a Whopper combo, so you get a burger, fries, and a drink, and that would cost me like $3.25.
Yeah. So maybe like your grandparents could get a Coke for 15 cents or
Oh,
something, right?
yeah. My grandmother used to tell me that if she would go to the supermarket and she would spend like a whole guilder, right, which is like two
The guild,
euros.
you're gonna have to help me on that one because I
No,
got no
I'm
clue what
sorry.
guild
Yeah, because the
is.
guilder doesn't exist anymore, like the florin, like
That
it's been
The
replaced
Dutch
by
guild,
it's been
the Dutch
replaced by the
guilder.
euro. Yeah, but back then we had guilders.
Hmm.
Anyway, it's like a dollar, right? Just say
Yeah,
it's a $1. But if she would spend like one whole dollar at the supermarket,
yeah.
then she would get like, like this free little Tupperware thing or something. Yeah.
Oh, it was like
Because
incentivized to spend more, then you'll get something for free.
yeah, but like a lot of times like her groceries would be like 80 cents or 90 cents. That was like her
For the whole
grocery
week,
bill the
right?
whole week. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying is like the fiat system, it like brings you up one way, right? It's like, oh, I remember I used to buy a Coke for 15 cents. Now you can like go to a gas station and buy, and that might be like $4. You go to ball game and pay like $5 for a Coke, you know? And then on the other end, you have like everything is getting more expensive over the years, right? Yeah, it can fluctuate from time to time, but basically the dollar is programmed to debase, as they say, right? Like we don't know what Bitcoin's gonna do. We know that the dollar will get debased. But with Bitcoin, the trend has been, even though it's been, even though you got Hanky out there saying it's like speculative, which I freaking hate because he picks his own time frame. But you have Bitcoin, and it's like, oh yeah, I paid 84,000 sats for sushi one night in 2023. And then it's going the other way where it's like, oh, you're gonna only have to pay, 15 sats for sushi one night in 2053. And so like everything just gets cheaper and cheaper in Bitcoin, which like we've already known that, but it was a really cool object lesson, I guess you could say, just to see how that all plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I always tell people, which to me always like I felt it, like in Holland, you're required when you get a salary, your employer is required to, I don't know, to hold back like 30% and put it in a pension fund for you, right? It's like this mandatory pension,
Yeah,
which we basically use to pay out the pension requirements of people who are retiring today, right?
the
But
Ponzi scheme. It's
yeah,
social security,
it's a massive passion scam because
social
and
security
then the
less.
government will provide you, the government or your employer will provide you with this sheet, that like okay, part of your pension is being put to work in like some kind of stocks, and they trade with it basically. right? Just to make sure it will keep a return. And then they give you these projections. You don't have to, right? We get like these options where you can either just put it like 100% savings, or you can have
Oh,
a little
really?
bit more aggressive pension fund. Yeah, so you can choose with a part of it.
In the
And
US, we're forced to.
I'm no specialist in pensions, but I just remember always looking at it, thinking it was like, yeah, yeah, whatever. I just know that a lot of people right now are all complaining that their pension doesn't buy them anything, because
Yeah.
they'll give me like this overview, and I'm gonna downplay it a little bit and whatever. I'm just like a pleb working in an office job,
Yeah,
a couple
yeah.
of years ago in Holland. But they'll give you this overview, and let's say it's like, okay, when you're 65, you'll get like $2,500 per month, right, in pension. And that I'm lowballing it here. Even if it's like double that or triple that, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Depends on your job, but you'll get an overview like this, and you'll be comparing that to your current salary, and you'll be like, oh, that's decent. Probably by that time I'll maybe go live in a little smaller house or whatever, because kids will be out of the house, and
Empty nester.
hopefully I've been able to like pay down my mortgage by that time, so maybe I can rent out my house. So you're already realizing that a pension will never be enough to just live off of. But the joke is like, what sounds like, let's say it's $3,000 a month now. You could be like, oh well, at least I could pay. But by the time I'm 65 or 70, they might make you work till you're 70 by that time.
Yeah.
Me being around 40, that's like 30 years from now. If you look at how inflation is going, that 2,000
Dude,
bucks will
it's
feel like,
nothing.
like it's 500 bucks or 300 bucks.
Dude,
So,
less than
and
that.
and that's really the painful part of it, because the value you're putting in now and what you think you're saving and what you think you're supposed to be getting, on
Gone.
paper they'll be right. They'll be like, yeah, see, we promised you your whole life you'd get 3,000. But as time progresses, you're going to be less and less happy with that 3,000, and you feel like you've gotten screwed by the time you've retired, and you won't be able to buy like 1 week's of groceries for it.
Dude,
So
it's so true. I mean, think about like, dude, I remember when I was like just getting started and trying to understand money and investing and all this stuff. Like one of the biggest things that which they still use today is, I don't know when this started or when it's gonna end, but it's still used today. They'll use a baseline and the baseline will be $1 million, right? It'll be if you do this from your 20s, well, when you're 65 and you retire, you'll have $1 million, And it's
yeah,
like, dude, if you're 25 right now, and so in 45 years or in 40 years when you turn 65, oh, you have $1 million saved up. What's that gonna buy you? Even 10 years ago, like $1 million home was like, oh, this is really good in the United States, in most places in the United States. Nowadays, like I'm from Sacramento, like $1 million home is nothing special anymore. Even like in
yeah.
Europe, like $1 million home,
It's still, to a
like
lot of people, it's still like a really beautiful home, but it's not like that $1 million home like
like it
when we
used
were
to.
like teenagers.
Yeah.
Like that
So
was like the rap stars that had $1 million homes, right?
yeah.
Like,
So imagine in 40 years, dude, like what is $1 million gonna get you? Like is that even
yeah.
gonna be enough to retire on? And what about if
I think
medicine's like way
like
better,
literally
life is
my
longer?
parents. So yeah, I'm sorry. Like my parents, they bought like their home back in the 70s, I believe, and they paid 70,000 guilders for it.
Yeah.
Which is about like $30,000.
I just keep thinking of like a fish when you say gilder. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's Holland, but anyway, it's like $30,000,
Gilder.
and
Yeah.
literally today that house is worth like $1 million. So it's
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 amazing.
you know it's
And it's only gonna it has to go faster because they have to keep printing because of pensions. Because of the demographics, there's less babies being born, so you have to keep printing because of that. People's houses, people always want their house price to go up, so that has to keep getting printed for. Like stock prices, you have to keep printing because you need stocks to keep going up. Like unfunded liabilities, whether that's healthcare or whatever it may be, all of these things have to be printed for. Not to mention the bond market, sovereign debt has to be printed for because no one's going out and buying bonds that are yielding lower than the inflation rate. So it's like all of these things, there's just more money being printed and printed and printed. And what can the average person do? You can't just be like, well, I'm going to save and hopefully, when I'm 65 years old, then I'm going to have enough money to retire on. I'm going to have $1 million, right? It's like that $1 million would be nothing to you. Like you can't trust that any amount of fiat will be enough for you at that time because we might not even be using fiat at that time. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting bit in the butt is like you can't like use the old like to succeed in today's world when the fiat is dying. You can't use old world metrics, you can't use old world models, you can't use old world like investing techniques. You have to upgrade what you're using, and it's like not even that hard. Right? It's like just use Bitcoin. That's it. Like it's way more simpler than what it used to be, but it's just Bitcoin just hidden in plain sight, and so it's really hard for people to see it. I think I don't know.
Did you see that graph that Lynn Alden found in like the US Treasury does like this monthly reporting thing.
Uh,
And they had like this infographic chart where it showed what the deficit was,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it was like a yellow bar at the bottom. It was
Exactly.
not, and it
So
wasn't drawn to scale.
exactly, that was the only part of the entire. So the deficit is like 1.1 trillion US dollars, right?
These guys.
And the total receipts are two 2 trillion, right? So in total, the outlays or the expenditures of the government are about 3 trillion, but they're only receiving $2 trillion of income, basically,
Yep.
right? So like the income is stuff like individual income taxes and social insurance and retirement stuff, what we were talking about just now.
Mhm.
That those two are pretty much the biggest chunks. And then like the expenditures are like social security, health, income security, national defense, Medicare, and net interest. The net interest, so the interest they have to pay on outstanding bonds is like 300 billion, so 0.3 trillion US dollars. But the joke is that the deficit is like a full 1.1 trillion US dollars. It's just insane. If you
Insane.
just remember that, like in 2008, right,
Yeah.
the United States government printed 800 billion. And we had Occupy Wall
Wall
Street and
Street.
everybody
Yeah.
went insane. It's
They
like,
went
you almost
bonkers.
printed a trillion.
Yeah.
Right now, the deficit is 1.1 trillion by itself, which is more than Social Security and health and income security together, right?
Totally.
National defense is 0.4 trillion. The deficit is 1.1 trillion. I can't repeat it again. So the interest they're going to have to pay on this stuff. So they have to print like 1 trillion at least just to cover the
just
deficit.
just a
But
gap,
how
just
are
to
they?
cover the gap.
Yeah, and then the debt they create more debt and more debt, and they have to pay interest on it, and the interest on that debt is increasing now. So
Because
this is
because
just
they're
like
and because they're
this
the
this
rates.
death spiral. Lavish and Preston Fish and all those guys keep talking about, right? Where like you just have so much credit card debt that like the interest you have to pay, you can't even pay the
Can't pay
interest
it.
anymore, right?
Can't pay it.
And the United States can't do it, so they keep printing it. So, but they're like in this doom loop where they're gonna have to accelerate printing and print more and print more. Basically just get like a new credit card to cover the old credit card debt, and like combine that with the interest, it just like spirals and accelerates out of control. And that's literally it's happening so fast now. So yeah, the next couple of years are going to be insane. And you know, they have to print this money because they can't go bankrupt, right? Like we have to raise the ceiling, the debt ceiling, and we can never default on our loan. No, that just means you keep printing. So you keep devaluating your currency. So it's yeah, basically what all Bitcoiners are saying now in the next, years or decade, we're just going to see accelerated printing. the dollar is going to go like inflationary, and who knows at what point it's going to go hyperinflationary. But people are going to feel it more and more and more. You're going to have to keep running harder and harder and trying to make more money because things are going to get more priced more expensively. You know, that hamburger or your supermarket, those prices are going to go up and up at an ever increasing rate, and your salary is not going to be able to keep up. So people are going to struggle more and more. They're going to get angry, and stuff is going to break.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean,
it's really happening in front of your eyes right now. It's fascinating.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I just say we're in full on zombie mode right now as a country, well, and basically every country in the world. We're in full on zombie mode. We have to print more money. We have our debts are greater than what we bring in. It's a zombie country. And so the only way to cover that up is to either get a loan from another country or to print your own money. And as you print your own
yeah,
money, you add more units into the broad supply of money, and that causes inflation. Like it's not even that hard. And I don't
yeah. And let
understand why
me.
more people
Okay.
aren't figuring this out. Like, especially like we hit like when you see the United States prints, 3 or 4 trillion in 2020 and 2021, like it's not that hard to see what's going on. I don't understand why more people aren't studying this stuff. And maybe they're just getting caught up in their daily lives, but this is going to affect everybody, and it's going to affect everybody in a bad way. So, like,
But think
you're,
about this, Sean, right? Like to add to the problems, right? This is what's going on. And then at the same time, you have countries or other nation states, because we live in this world where the United States dollar is, the world reserve currency. So there's like a lot of dollar demand because of trade, and because of the whole euro dollar system. And I have to keep repeating because I didn't know that up until like a year ago or something. Like euro dollar is just, it's not euros. It has nothing to do with the euro. It's
it's
just
offshore.
dollars
Off-
outside of the United States. And yeah,
Yeah,
but
George Gammon
imagine,
loves talking about the euro dollar. That's his number one.
right? But imagine now, right? Imagine Brazil does so much trade in dollars, right? And Russia and India. And now they're deciding with the BRICS countries, you know what? Screw the dollar. We're just going to do it in, I don't know, the Chinese yuan or whatever new currency they come up with or whatever. But we're not using the dollar anymore. That means that there's a massive dumping of dollars from that part of the globe as well.
Yeah,
That demand for dollars, where are
comes
those
back
dollars going to go? They're dumping
comes
them.
back
They're
on
all
shore.
flowing back in. Yeah, but so
I don't know.
yeah, it only, once it goes, it goes. It's once that trust is broken, everybody will start dumping it, and I feel like we're seeing that happening. Like people are like, but when is it going to happen? I think it's happening already, honestly.
What doesn't make
Like you can
sense is
literally,
what's kind of
you
crazy
can,
is like how these countries have been playing this charade for so long. Honestly, like if I was in China and I went to Saudi Arabia and was like, "Hey, I want to buy oil or gas from you." Like, why do they need like? I was like, "Why are we doing this in a different country's money? Why don't we just do it in ours or in yours? Like or in gold."
because they enforced it, Sean. That's what I tell you. Those are those nuclear
Exactly.
submarines we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what happened to Gaddafi? You know what
Yeah,
happened to
Saddam. Yeah,
Saddam?
or Saddam was.
Yeah,
Anytime that anyone has tried to stop the U.S. dollar hegemony, what's happened is you end up with the U.S. troops on your soil. So,
yeah. You get sanctioned, right? Like first
yeah,
they'll put like economic sanctions on you, and they'll pressure and they'll put trade embargoes and stuff on you, and that's enough to kill your economy. So you just, you didn't have a choice.
yeah, which is interesting because this may be another reason how Bitcoin does a little Trojan horse in Latin America or even in like that Bhutan country is like these smaller countries, they're so small that the United States may feel like, well, what's the point? It's too small to even do anything to them, right? And at the same time, like they like at least in El Salvador, they have the U.S. dollar is also recognized as a global or as their country's currency. It's legal tender there, so it's the U.S. dollar plus Bitcoin. So maybe that's how Bukele is like escaping scot-free, is because he's like, well, look, we still use the dollar, right? They use Bitcoin, but then they also use the dollar. So yeah, there's one other country in Latin America that uses the dollar, that's dollarized, which is Ecuador. So it'd be interesting to see if they make that move. There's talks of, Argentina wants to get dollarized. I'm sure Brazil as well. Those both those countries are going through crazy inflation. So it would be interesting if those countries get dollarized, and then it's like, then you get dollarized, you move to a Bitcoin standard while you're still dollarized, and what can the US do against you? I don't know. Those are all really interesting ways to Trojan horse Bitcoin into your country, into a
Yeah.
global.
There's been so much developments lately, Sean, because you know, like I think 3 years ago, a CBDC was like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, right? That's
Yeah.
never going to happen. We're never going to see that in. But the drum of the CBDC has only gotten louder all across the world, right? And there's actually countries already implemented it. And now we got this news, and I don't think it was the IMF who launched it, but it was at an IMF event that this new unicoin was unveiled. This news came out just this week. Did you follow up on that? Like, did
No,
you
I
did you
saw
read up?
I did see that. I didn't take a deep dive into it though, but I did see that. I saw that. Just the name alone is funny.
Yeah, it sounds like Uniswap or Unicorn or
Yeah.
it's just
Well, they're
I
trying to
put a
be.
tweet out there. I was like, okay, so now we have 20,001 shit coins, right?
Yeah.
Because now the IMF also decides to. But this just goes to show that like why is everybody all of a sudden in the interest of just like creating their own money and creating coins? And it just goes to show that like, okay, you know, at least back in it also really speaks to gold in my and I know every Bitcoiners like to shit on gold, and I'm one of them too, because
Yeah.
Bitcoin is obviously outperforming gold. But at the
It's the
same
second
time,
best.
like
Gold is the second best. We'll give it that.
yeah, sure, I could go along with that.
Yeah.
At least there's proof of work gone into obtaining that gold, and there's definitely a limited supply. There might be a lot of gold like in the earth still, and if production goes up, we get more gold. But there's a real world cost associated with it. It's not easy to get gold.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of work.
There's constraints on the supply.
So it's a fair system. Like, but all these unicoins, the CBDCs they're talking about, and fiat, they are
Yeah.
all literally just created by the push of a button
Yeah.
by your overlords. And they all say, trust us, because we are the central bank, we are the central authority, and that's what's backing this coin. You can trust us. Yeah.
So okay,
I don't know. I don't even have to
here
say more. Right? I
have you
hate
seen
like
have you
reiterating this because if
yeah.
people don't see this by now, then I just don't know what to tell you.
Well, people don't see it. Well, first of all, because no one, how many people are actually paying attention to it, right? Dude, I remember when I used to listen to like the crypto podcast back in 2017, 2018. They would talk about a digital dollar, right? And they were all excited about it, which I didn't know what to think about it. And then one day, dude, one day just clicked. I'm like, oh, CBDC is a tool of surveillance. It's the opposite of Bitcoin being a tool of freedom. And so here's something though that I would say. Well, there's two tweets that I've seen lately. One was from Steve Hanke, who he was like, oh, I was getting coffee with my wife, and some guy, I was listening to this one guy talking about CBDCs and how they're gonna, he was some conspiracy theorist talking about how CBDCs are gonna take away, all our freedoms, and it's gonna be a tool of surveillance. And and then I saw Mandrick was like, and then Steve Hanke explained to the guy and all the coffee shop how CBDCs are actually a tool of freedom and bring more inclusivity to the world. And the whole coffee shop stood up and started clapping for him. It's like, what? How is it not a tool of surveillance? First of all, second of all, this is what I wanted to really talk about is Joe Carlasari. He's been tweeting a lot about how he's like, well, what's the difference really between a CBDC and what we have currently? you know, and as far as the banking system is concerned. What I would kind of like to know your thoughts on, you know, what is the difference? Is it just more surveillance? Is it directly from the state instead of there's no intermediary with a bank? Like what is the difference between, because they, like banks can already shut off your account, they can already, you know, freeze or seize your money. Uh like what is the difference between a CBDC and what we currently have? I mean, we're kind of already, it makes me
Yeah.
think we're already living in a dystopia a little bit.
Yeah, no, that point was definitely taken to heart. I saw those as well. Where it's like, oh, people are scared, like, oh, then they're able to like see all your transactions. Well, like we can already see all your transactions. And look at the Canadian truckers, right? We can like pinpoint every trucker to seize their funds. So it's not like a CBDC is going to be novel in that sense. And then your question, like, what is a CBDC? Like, to be honest, like I don't even know yet because like they're not implemented yet. The government is real stingy on like you literally hear Christine Lagarde. I'm talking Europe here again. I'm sorry. But Christine Lagarde of the European Central Bank says, like, yeah, it's not decided yet, but we're going to decide on it in October. And then when I ask my family and friends in Holland, like, have you heard of a CBDC? No, I have no
No,
idea. Did you know there's a no? So there's
no.
no debate, there's no discourse. This European Central Bank is like changing the money and deciding on all this kind of stuff. And there's going to be a vote, I guess, somewhere in October. I don't know, but they're not really explaining what it's going to do. And she says there will be control, right? So what kind of controls? Well, what they're doing now in Europe, at least, is like every year they're reducing the amount of cash you can take from the ATM per day or per week, right? So there's this where they're
Thousand
trying
dollars.
to,
That's
yeah,
minimum.
yeah. I believe in France, if you spend more than €1,000, which is about $1,000 in cash, then literally Christine Lagarde says, like, okay, well, it's a gray area. You could go to jail, right?
Ridiculous. That's
So
abs.
it's
It's so ridiculous.
okay, exactly. But this is not a conspiracy anymore. This is
No,
her
it's not.
actual words. You can
And
look it
people
up,
and people are
right?
just
So
okay with it. People are, why are people okay with
this
it?
is the frog. This is the frog in the water getting boiled slowly, right?
Yeah.
It's like people are just not outraged at all.
No,
We're just
that's
like,
it.
well, I use electronic anyway. I don't need cash, and then she throws in something like, yeah, the terrorist attacks in France a couple of years ago on Charlie Hebdo. I don't know if they were all financed by these microcredit stuff, and it's like, really,
Oh,
how do I know that wasn't even like a CIA operation for all
yeah.
I know, right? I don't want to be too conspiracies, but come on, is that so? But this CBDC, yeah, let's talk about what's really different, right? I mean, yes, they're going to be able to control, but what they're going to be able to do, I guess, is, and that's what I see coming more, is that it's actually going to be like programmed uniformly, right? So
Yeah,
an
what
example, I don't like, I'm going to give you you're on some kind of social program where you get like rent extra, a little subsidy for your rent, right? Because you're like on minimum wage or whatever. And the
UBI.
government has this program that this 5% of the population has the right to some extra free money to help them with their rent. So they have this minimal standard of living, right? Well, then they give you that money, but they'll be like, okay, you can only use that money to actually pay for your rent, right? So I don't know how they implement it, or you get food money, right, for food, but you're only allowed to spend those euros or dollars at a supermarket. And if you go try and spend them anywhere else to buy Bitcoin, for instance, they're going to say, you're not allowed to spend it there. Or you're buying clothes, you're not allowed to spend it on that. And who knows, maybe your kid, we take decisions all the time. If you're literally minimum wage and your kid's going to school in like old clothes, you might be like, you know what? I'm just gonna buy these clothes for my kids first, right? Because he has a bad day or important day at school tomorrow, and then your money. Yeah, you can debate whether it's your money or not, right? And that's how we're gonna get slow cooked as well. And then once they put in those controls, it's just gonna extend further and further. And they can tax you directly, or they can put an expiration date on your money,
The
and
question,
that's obviously
the
harder to
question,
implement from
yeah,
the way
that's the,
money is implemented now. Yeah.
go to the question that every person has to ask themselves is, where do we draw the line, right? Like, where do we draw the line as far as when is it not my money, right? Because if it's my money, I can spend it however I want to, however I please, and however much at any time. And if it's not my money, then there's controls on it. And I have a third party telling me when and where and how much I can spend. And I think that's what we're seeing with this with the climate scam is is a whole new thing of it's like there's going to be a social credit score connected to every purchase that you have, which who knows if that's true or not, right? It's like lately every
Well,
conspiracy
yeah,
theory has been coming true. So if people are saying it and it's possible, the state's gonna take every like if they can do it, they're gonna do it, you know? Like why wouldn't they do it? Why would they not take more control? If
the
people
point
don't
is,
care, you know, and I think this is
yeah,
one more thing is that we just have so many people out there who go, well, I don't care about my privacy. Well, I don't care about them doing the state doing. It's like, well, one day, then you'll just be a slave because they'll keep taking. Like there won't be a stop to it, you know. And I think that's the issue.
they'll
There won't be a
actually
stop to it.
the way they'll enslave you is not by taking, but by giving, right? We like sounds weird, but think about it, right? They're gonna put you on like this central bank digital currency standard, which is just like points, a
Yeah,
point system,
they'll give you
and
UBI,
they're going to give you so much of it, and you're talking about this is my money, right?
convenient.
What
Yeah,
is your money?
yeah.
What is your money,
You didn't
right? The
work for
money
it.
that you worked for or saved. Yeah, exactly, you didn't work for it. So by just creating more and more of it, even if you had some money that you actually worked for and saved for, it's just being diluted at such an incredible rate, it's like complete worthless, right? You've just that money has been completely debased, so you saved in money that they were able to like completely dilute, and then they're flooding everybody with all this free money, and now everybody's dependent on them, right? Because yeah.
Well,
So
well,
that's why.
it just goes back to like, oh yeah, they're gonna implement expiration date on your money. Well, our money already has an expiration, and this goes to Joe Carlasari's point. Our money already has expiration date on it because of inflation. And
Right.
and so people don't realize that like inflation is just a slow expiration date on your money. And so like but this will the expiration dates will come quicker, they'll come faster. And it is a really good point. Like if you get confused by what money actually is, which this is the real biggest point right here. If you're getting confused by what money isn't something that can just be given to you, right? Like it's something that you're working because if it can be given to you, then it can also be taken away from you. And so I think that that's what people have to realize is like if you're just accepting money willy-nilly from your government without understanding where it's coming from or why it's coming to you, there's also going to be there's going to be little contingencies on that money. You know, it's like accepting money from your in-laws or you know or letting your in-laws buy you a home. Oh, okay, well now every time that they come over you have to do exactly what they say because they're paying for your lifestyle. And so that's the same way. If the government's paying for your lifestyle, then you have to accept everything that they tell you to do because they'll just take it away if you don't do what they say. And I think that's the biggest issue is like, do you want freedom or do you want convenience? And most people right now are siding on the side of convenience, but eventually it won't be convenient. It'll hurt. And that's when you're going to want freedom. But are we going to be able to see it before it happens? I just don't know if enough people are going to be able to see this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you can come at it from like different schools of thought, right? I mean, there's also people, and history speaks to that as well, that says like every currency eventually collapses for the same reasons. It happened to Rome. It's you become too big, the government, and the militaries, and they all need finance, and you get overstretched. So they start diluting the coins, or they start clipping coins, to keep paying for like their deficits and stuff. And it happened time and time and time in history again. All great civilization got too big, and then ultimately, yeah, collapsed on itself, right? So just from that historical lessons, you can be like, okay, well, maybe that's about the phase that the US is in. Doesn't mean that the entire world collapses, right? It just means that, like there's like a rebalancing of power. People will start looking for other currencies they have more trust in, right? Or other assets, whether that's back to gold or back to Bitcoin. Obviously, we've never had Bitcoin before. So it doesn't have to mean that it's like this radical and like this CBDC thing feels like those last twitchy movements of a dying
Yes.
empire, right?
Yeah. It's the
Like the
last
same kind of
last
stuff
breath.
where they come with like more things of control. Like, oh my God, think of Rome. They had these armies all over Europe, and there were like these, like sub parts of the armies or factions defecting and stuff. And then they came with like really repressive and shocking punishments, to keep people from defecting, right? Because they saw like, oh my God, if others are going to do this as well. But ultimately, I also think of like if this CBDC is really like this dystopian thing, people are just not going to accept it, right? I mean, a government is still beholden ultimately. I mean, as long as they get to like turn up the heat slowly and we don't, really notice it. But if the water is really boiling, people are going to get out of that pan, right? They're not going to like, they're going to revolt. And then there's going to have to be some heavy hand pushing them back into the pan. But yeah, I don't know
Depends
if
on,
the government has that big heavy hand, and then
I think
I
it
think it'll
depends on
just
how many people.
crumble from within, and things will change. Yeah.
I I think a lot of it just depends on how many people will push back and how many people with a big enough voice will push back, right? Because if you go to like the lockdown period, you had a lot of celebrities were vocally voicing for everyone to stay inside and to mask up and do all these things and to be
Yeah.
compliant. And so who, even like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was like, screw your freedoms, right? And then he comes out like a month ago and apologizes for that sentiment. It's like, dude, oh, well, what does that mean? Your apology doesn't mean anything right now. Like you need to say
Yeah.
the right things when we're in the middle of it. And so I think it just goes to show we need more Bitcoin. We need people who have FU money, can't be bought.
But even those people ultimately, I have one of those friends, right, who's in that camp, so I'm always in a debate with him. It gets really heated, and we just end the discussion deciding we'll agree not to agree, right? But
Yeah,
I can kind of agree where he's coming from too. He was like, yeah, but he wants to defend, he's like, okay, but look, we have so much stuff to tank as well for organizations. And I mean, you can't organize the Olympics without having like an organizing body, a centrally organized
yeah,
body, and all this. So you still need organization, and like we need like some form of democracy. So and like all the stuff you've learned in school, so he's still in that camp very much. And he's like, yeah, I'm also seeing that like this vaccine was developed at record space, and we probably haven't tested, but it was also all new. And he's like, didn't agree with the lockdowns either, but we had to do something. And he was like, look, I'm just gonna look at it for a bit, and if it really comes dystopian, then I'm definitely on your side, he says, but he kind of had the hope that, and now
yeah,
he's saying like, yeah, and look, things have gone like a little bit more back to normal, right? So I mean, and we don't have that CBDC, and they didn't tie the vaccine to your passport yet, right? So he's like, see, it wasn't all that bad. Maybe you were like overreacting a little bit, Anyway, my point being, I'm not saying he's right or I'm right, but the point is he was paying attention, he still had belief in the old system. But if the old system would keep deteriorating and getting more and more repressive, there would be a point where he would switch and just not take it anymore either.
yeah. But when like this is the issue, right? Is you can say that all you want, and I know you're not saying this, it's your buddy, but still, it's like you can say that all you want, but when it gets to that time, you can't say anything. Like think about the people that tried to speak against the narrative at that time. They were getting their YouTube shut off. They were getting their Twitter accounts canceled. They were getting banned from Facebook. Banned. They were getting erased from any existence of having any type of media. And so like you know like at
Yeah,
some
but you
point, if
see,
the narrative is rolling so strong, and then you say, "Well, this looks like it's finally crossing my line." Well, dude, you're just get rolled over. Like
Yeah.
it's moving too quickly, and
But
so I think that's the hard part is you can't just say, oh, I'm not gonna participate in this when at that point everything is moving so fast. Like there's nothing you
yeah,
can.
and look at like in Europe, a lot of this stuff is happening, right? Like, so the French are protesting now that their pension age is like being raised again,
Yeah.
right? And people do take to the streets at a certain point. Look at the Dutch farmers as well, like,
Yes. Yeah.
and still they're not winning. It's not very effective because those freaking politicians will just keep pushing their own agenda forward. But people are getting angrier and angrier, and you will see blood in the streets, right? Like, ultimately people are going to revolt. And the beauty about Bitcoin to me is like, this is like, super effective. You don't have to, take your tractor and drive down to like your capital and stand there for days in the cold or in the
Peacefully.
heat or in the rain, whatever. No, you just like, if you don't like what your government is doing, you simply buy
Out.
Bitcoin.
You opt out.
Just opt out of their system of control, and they're going to have to start listening to you again. That simple. So it's the easiest revolution, you'll ever partake in. I love that saying. It's not my own. I didn't come up with that. Honestly, I remember it was MTC, from the meme factory. He
Yeah.
said that, like that was one of his better quotes I really like. It's like, dude, this is like the easiest fight we're going to fight, right? Because we get to fight it from the comfort of your own home buying Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, the war right now, the fight is for the mind. And so that's the thing is, are enough people going to be able to make this decision? And I think that's, when I talk to a lot of people that go, well, how does Bitcoin fix this? And I think you just nailed it, right? It's like their tool of control is the money. Everyone needs it. It's half of every transaction. Everybody needs money. And that's their tool of control, whether that's, used as a weapon overseas or they can use it as a weapon domestically, is the control of their own money. And so if you opt out of their money, it's separation of state and money. And so if we opt out of the money, then we can opt out of the control that they have over us. And they're no longer like the in-laws that control every little thing that we do. But now we have more freedom in our lives. And it comes with more responsibility. You got to write down 12 words. You got to write down those 12 words, or else
Yeah.
you don't have that freedom. It's not that hard, but it's still what you got to do. And no one's going to come and save you when you lose those 12 words. Those are there's no helpline, there's no customer service to call. So like,
Yeah,
gotta,
it is. It is a little bit hard. It was so funny. Like, speaking of George Gammon, I actually met up with the guy here in Medellin. We had a bit. There was a Bitcoin meetup, and he showed up at it, which was quite funny, right?
yeah.
And at
How was
the
that?
and yeah, the meetup, it was really small, which was good. I think there was about like 20 people in total, but it was really good because there's more and more
Bitcoin
like
only?
yeah, we had pleb music was there, which was really fun. Luke Mikic, Luke
Yeah.
Hoddle, do you know him? Luke Mikic, the Australian guy. He also fled, yeah, Australia, and he's here in Medellin now. So got to meet him for the first time, and he also brought some other people. There was a Belgian guy. There was a couple of people from the States, and there were a few local Colombian guys.
You talk,
And one of the
did you talk to Gammon about his run-ins with Magoo? On
No, I didn't mention that. I figured, let me try and keep it simple. It's one thing to go at people on Twitter, right? But like when you're and I know he was like always ranting in his Magoo fight as well about like being,
Yeah.
why are you Magoo hiding behind your avatar? So
Yeah.
I did mention to him that I'm one of those toxic laser-eyed maximalists, and that I was even part of the group that started Laser Eyes, right? So he was like, "Oh, so I have you to thank for that." But
Yeah.
it was pretty amicable, and he was just like, at least that's how he came across, interested in learning more about Bitcoin, and he was asking like what kind of Lightning wallets are the most secure, and then Luke was like giving him
Any of
one
them.
answer, I gave another answer, and that's when you realize, that it's pretty hard, right?
Yeah,
Like,
because
so
this guy
it's like,
knows a
what's the
lot.
difference between Lightning and just on chain? If somebody doesn't know,
Was he
right?
asked that?
No, but if somebody asks you, right? So like somebody new comes up to you and asks you, what's the difference between like on-chain Bitcoin and Lightning?
Yeah.
And then you're like,
You gotta,
okay,
yeah.
well,
How do I
don't worry
explain
too
it?
much about it. Just install a Lightning wallet. And then you're like, but you have to remember one is custodial, one isn't. Okay, what's the difference between custodial and
Oh,
non-custodial?
yeah.
Dude, it's really not easy to explain to
No.
noobs without like just being overwhelming, right? It's so it's
The
not
way that I do it is I just go look. It's like it's a layer two. And then the way I do it is I go look on chain. It takes about 10 minutes for your transaction to
layer
go
two.
through.
What's layer two?
Lightning's the layer two.
Well,
And
what
so,
does that mean?
well, this is how I explain it. I say on chain is like I say, when you make a transaction on your card and you swipe it, and I go, yeah, and I go, but you know how it'll say pending for like the next 2 or 3 days? And I go, yeah, I do notice that. And I go, well, that's like on
When?
chain.
Where? No. Where do
What?
they say that pending for 2 or 3 days?
Like if you go into your bank app on your phone, like if you go into your bank app, once you swipe your card, it'll say like pending. It won't go through on your bank app right away. It'll always say like the last 2 days or so of your transactions will say pending. But the money goes through instantly. So it's not pending. The transaction happens. And so that transaction, like that you swipe your card, that's the layer two. That's the lightning. It happens instantly,
Yeah.
and
Right, I
but
get
on
it. So
chain,
you
on
work more with analogies, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
for
They're
me, that
specific.
wouldn't work. If I was the noob and you were explaining that to me, I'd hear you, but
You would
I'd be like,
understand that.
okay, but I want to understand why it's like that,
Oh,
right?
okay, yeah.
And
Yeah. If I
I
wanted
also
that, yeah, you
wanted to
could get
know,
into it. You could
yeah,
really get into it, but not everyone wants to know exact like, oh, it's actually not every 10 minutes, it might take more than the next block, right? Like depending on what the fees are.
and
You could
before you
glitch
know
by
it, you're
fee.
explaining like blocks and signatures
Yeah.
and proof of
Sat,
work and
sat per V byte, like explaining everything.
yeah.
Yeah. How many
So
confirmations
yeah,
do you really need? So there's a lot of, yeah, like you could break it down and explain exactly what it is, or you can make the analogy of the current banking system, uh, which is, I think,
yeah.
like that does enough for most people when you just explain the analogy of the current banking system of what Lightning is compared to on chain. You know, that's that's how I do it at least.
Yeah. It's not easy. It's still not easy, If I compare, it's like explaining like to my dad how this all works. And because I can't get into the technicals of it, explaining how it really works. And this is my
That's the
frigging
issue. You can't.
engineering argument again. Like if people are not inclined to understand how a system works, then you can never get too technical because you lose
No,
them, right? And that means they never really get how it works. And that's why they're always like, yeah, yeah, I just don't get how it works. And then they don't trust it, right? Because they don't get how it works.
I don't
That's
think so. I
my own
disagree.
frustration.
I disagree. I think most people don't understand how most things work in their lives today, right? I think most people don't understand how their computer works. They don't understand how an airplane works. They don't understand how their car works. They don't understand how their phone works. They don't understand how a lot of things work. They don't even understand how the light bulb turns on when they flip the switch, right? Like people don't understand how most things work in their lives.
Yeah, but you
What
know
they care about
why
is
it's
if
really
what they care about is if it does work. I think that's the most important thing is if you can go, yeah,
that's
Bitcoin
true.
does work. It hasn't been hacked in 14 years. That it's been around for 14 years. It continues to work every 10 minutes. There's a new block and it hasn't been hacked. I think that is the more important
But
thing.
Sean, it all comes back down when you say Bitcoin, you can always say it always boils back down to trust.
Yeah.
Because literally, if they don't understand how it works, but they're seeing that it's working, then they're trusting that it will keep working because you don't know how it works, right? But then you see something like FTX happen, or you see in the banking world that like a real bank collapses and your funds are gone. Then it's like, hey, I'm starting to lose trust in these banks, right? How do I know I can trust this Bitcoin thing? Well, the way I knew that I could trust it is because I figured out how it works. And if like people can tell me, remember when Jamie Dimon was saying, well, how do you know Satoshi's not going to show up and say, haha, here's more than 21 million?
Yeah,
Well, because
he doesn't
obviously
know. He doesn't.
either he's just playing stupid or he really doesn't know. But the point
No,
is, if you
he
fall
doesn't.
for that,
He doesn't
that
know.
is because look, anybody listening to that and saying, yeah, 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 that's because they don't know how it works.
They don't understand the
And
having
now
supply
they're
schedule. Like the
yeah,
having
so
supply
you
schedule
can
makes a 21 million cap. Like that alone makes the 21 million cap is because of the having.
well, not only because of the halving, but also because everybody runs the nodes and because we had the block size wars and that you
Yeah.
can't just change Bitcoin's consensus rules, right? So
Oh,
um
yeah, because of that consensus combined with the having supply schedule, there will never be more than there will never actually even be 21 million coins mined. It'll only be it'll be an asymptote getting closer and closer to 21 million that never actually touches it.
yeah.
But
But again, people who don't know what an asymptote is or have no clue what the hell you just said, right? They're just trusting. All right,
it's
well,
a curve. It's a
Sean
curve that
seems like somebody who ran the numbers,
approaches a
and
line and never touches it.
you're missing my point, dude. Right? It's like, yeah, it's either you trust it or you've ran the numbers and you verified for yourself, right? And with Bitcoin, it's possible to do that, so you don't need that trust. You can trust me that I ran the numbers or somebody else did it, that's fine. But the point is, you can, right?
You
And
can
it
verify.
it does check out. And trust me, if it didn't check out, you'd be hearing about it
I'm
because
not gonna trust you.
people are gonna, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
what else? So what you've been working on, Sean? Have you been building during this bear market?
yeah, dude. I've been working a lot.
What you've been working on? Basketball, Fiat.
Dude, I've been working on
I
everything.
know, dude. I heard you mention to somebody that you're putting out the website for the having party this week.
Yeah, that is, and I'm gonna hold myself to it. So
That's pretty exciting, man. So
let's get it done, dude. Let's get this having party going. Let's you know who pissed me off. I mean, you do know who pissed me
oh
off.
well,
It was Nick
I
Carter.
I thought Hanky.
No, well, yeah, that guy too, but no one pisses me off.
Hanky seems to be living rent free in your head.
I don't care about Steve Hanke. Screw that guy. Nick Carter, when he said there's no serious founders who identify with the plebs. At that moment, I was like, dude, we like we got to build something special on top of Bitcoin, and I hope that I can do that with part, and I can be part of that, like with the meme factory, with the having party. I think that's something that I think a lot of us identified was missing was a celebration of the halving, which to me is one of the most important things in Bitcoin. Is actually Bitcoin. It's not fiat. It's not some random, Bitcoin 2023. Why? I don't know. That's not part of Bitcoin's protocol. What is the halving is actually in Bitcoin's protocol. And so to me, I think it's important to celebrate actual things of Bitcoin. And so
Yeah.
I hope we can go down to
Let's
El
be
Salvador.
honest, right? If you look at Riot blockchains, for instance, are they not like serious founders? There's so many like good Bitcoin only companies. You have this
Yeah.
Dutch company who just came out with this really awesome documentary. It's called BitTonic. They were like one of the first in Holland. They were like the first guys to set up an exchange. And they've been in business now for 10 years. They're like the most successful Bitcoin only
Yeah.
company in the Netherlands. But these guys are not on Twitter all day talking about Bitcoin maximalist and shit coins, just like how Nick Carter is. Nick Carter is the ones that, leveraging his writing to get more clout and invest in all kind of VC programs. And then
Yeah.
he
But
gets called out for it and then he wants to lash back. I mean, just the guy is not even worth your time. It's just such a joke. There's so many serious founders out there, but
yeah.
they're not at the level to stoop down to Nick Carter's level and start shit posting and getting into stupid screaming matches on Twitter with him. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
the only people who are triggered by that are like the Bitcoin plebs that, like fight on Twitter with him all day.
I'm a pleb, dude. What can I say?
Yeah, me too. Me too.
And I think it'll just be awesome when the guys who started the laser eyes, the laser eye crew holds
Remember when Nick
holds
Carter thought he started Laser Eyes?
yeah, yes, I
That
do.
just show
It just
it's
pisses,
like so
he's so
typical.
delusional, dude. The kid is delusional. And so that's what I'm saying
My
is
star will continue to rise. Yeah,
yeah,
he's like this egocentric, narcissistic type, you know. It's just
exactly. And so when the meme factory goes down to El Salvador and we throw a freaking awesome banger of a having party that plebs get to come to and get to go around El Salvador after the party or before the party, whatever, and really just get to enjoy the having and Bitcoin and the last bear market and the new bull market that's approaching. It's just gonna be like, that's right, mother effer. We came here as the laser eye crew, and we're gonna be successful at this. Like, yeah, I may be a basketball player. We all may have like our different backgrounds, but we're Bitcoiners, we're plebs, and we can remain Bitcoin only and be successful and have a good time and still have that pleb mentality because we're not gonna leverage our Bitcoin, like we're not gonna do stupid, we're not gonna sell ordinals, you know, we're not going to sell NFTs. Like we're just going to be focused on Bitcoin and provide a good service for at a fair price. And we're just going to keep
dude,
it.
I'm really looking forward to it. Like just hanging out, just like this last Bitcoin meetup here in Medellin. It's so fun. Like whenever I meet like Pleb Music or Jeje or then last time it was Luke, time just flies by. You're just like hanging out, you're drinking, you're laughing, you're getting back memories. Like we've been hanging out for like so long now.
Yes, dude.
Like
Yeah.
fighting on the front lines against shitcoiners, fighting fudsters like Greenpeace.
We deserve it.
Together riffing on what Bitcoin could mean for the future. And like I don't know. It's just awesome. I look forward to meeting everybody. I still haven't met you in real
Still haven't
life
met.
or
Still haven't
anybody
met.
of the meme factory for that matter. So it's gonna be a lot of fun meeting all you guys in person and just hanging out for a couple of days. I don't need no big show with like a bunch of speakers or whatever. I'm just really honestly just looking forward to like eating some good food, drinking some drinks, shooting the shit, and
That's gonna be the best part.
celebrating the happening. It's gonna be
Yeah.
awesome.
Whether
Yeah.
we're gonna have a couple of good speakers there who are gonna be awesome. Uh, but the best part's gonna be just being able to hang out with Bitcoiners, dude. Like that's gonna be the best part for me too. All right. Well, I think that's good enough for today. Unless you had something else you want to bring up. Any final?
No. Let's might as
Final
well
words?
close it. I don't even know how long we've been going. Has it
Me
been an
neither.
hour?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, maybe a little more. Okay,
Yeah.
well, for everyone else tuning in, remember that the Meat Factory podcast, we go live Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Don't miss out. We always got a great show. It's been a lot of fun. Bring on some of the best guests, some of the best people in Bitcoin. Uh, and remember, what you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, don't just let it stay here. Please like, subscribe, share this episode, other episodes, your favorite episode of Bitcoiner's Guide. Leave us a comment, give us a comment. Let us know you're watching. Shout outs to everyone who's been commenting, BTC Moon Guy, Fake, Triple XL Hodl. We got to give everyone else a shout out. We got to give the beginning of the shows too. We'll do that. We'll get better at it. And as for Bitcoiner's Guide, episode 51 from Mr. Plan Marcus and Big Sean Harris, we're over now. Peace.